Well, hi there. This is Dr. Stephanie Crowder again, and I want to welcome you to the second installment of our overview of what is theological field education. In our first installment, we discussed in general what we mean by theological field education. I gave you just a cursory overview of what is field education as far as field placement. I also just briefly discussed the clinical pastoral education experience that's required for our MDiv students here at Chicago Theological Seminary. In this second installment, I want us to talk about the field placement experience specifically. And then in the third installment, we'll talk in more detail about what we mean by clinical pastoral education and the nuts and bolts of that experience. And so again, I want to welcome you to this second video as it relates to your theological field education experience at CTS. And again, we'll spend our time with this module particularly talking about your field placement experience. What do we mean then by theological field education at Chicago Theological Seminary? And it depends on the degree program. For persons who are getting your MDiv or your Master of Divinity degree, you have two distinct requirements. You are required to, first of all, complete a unit of CPE, that is a unit of clinical pastoral education. And many students choose to complete that in their second semester of their first year, or they decide to wait until their third year of their MDiv program to begin their CPE program. But whatever way you decide to approach the matter, if you decide to do it within your first year, or if you decide to do it within your second year, do it within your third year, just know that before you begin your CPE experience, you're required to complete at least 4 classes here at CTS. And one of those 4 classes has to be Intro to Pastoral Counseling or the online version of Intro to Pastoral Theology. And so that's a requirement. So you at least have to have a semester of coursework under your belt before you begin your CPE experience. Also, as an MDiv student here at CTS, you're required to complete 400 hours of what we called field placement. And so that's what we're going to talk in detail about here in this video. What do we mean by field placement, and what are your options? If you are an MARL student, that's the Master of Arts in Religious Leadership student, then you do not have to complete the CPE unit, but akin to the MDiv students, you do have to complete 400 hours of community field placement. And so both MDiv and MARL students are required to have 400 hours, or basically a field placement experience that runs from September through May. As you're taking field placement, you will sign up for FE 471, which is the field education class, but you'll also sign up for LM 400, which is the leadership and ministry and context course as well. So as you do field placement, you'll have the FE 471 class, and you'll also have the LM 400, or the leadership and ministry and context course as well. What do we mean by field placement? Well, again, it's roughly 400 hours of basically hands-on experience. It's sort of where, like I say, where the rubber meets the road. It's where you're taking all the theory and the ideas and concepts that you've learned in class, and you're putting them into practice, or it's praxis, in the real world. And so you are perhaps working with a feeding program, or working with a community garden, or you're helping a particular parish or congregation with teaching courses, or you're serving as a student minister or student pastor at a church or a parish, or you're working in a synagogue or serving in a synagogue. We're going to have Jewish students and Muslim students, and so you may even be serving in a mosque. And since we are committed to interreligious dialogue, it won't be unusual to have perhaps Christian students who are also serving in Muslim, and I would hope Jewish context as well. But in whatever the context is, it's basically runs from September through May, 400 hours of service, of hands-on experience. You're meeting an hour a week with your supervisor or your ministry mentor who's sort of guiding you and helping you to sort of process what you're experiencing. At the same time, you will spend about roughly 10 to 15 hours a week of engaging in hands-on work and in service and ministry, if you will. And so again, while you're doing the kind of external ministry service work, we'll also want to have some degree of accountability here at CTS. And so the way in which we kind of check in with you to see how you're doing, and again help you to process theologically even more so what is going on, and from an academic stance, you'll sign up for the FE 471 class, and you'll spend a lot of time in the LM 400 Leadership and Ministry and Context course as well. Before you begin field placement, do know that you have to have had 8 courses here at Chicago Theological Seminary. And so before you even sign up for field placement, make sure that yes, you've had intro to pastoral care or intro to pastoral theology, but that you've also had systematic theology. So you should have had 8 courses, and of those 8 courses, 2 should have been intro to pastoral care and intro to systematic theology. What are, your options as it relates to field placement? Well, the options are numerous, if you will. I mean, yes, a parish setting, religious institution settings, congregation settings, those are given for the most part. But you may feel that God is calling you to chaplaincy. So how can we put you in a place that will give you some experience in a chaplaincy setting? You may decide that you want to work with educational programs through a social service agency, or maybe issues of justice and advocacy are part of your calling or vocation. You may decide that, hey, you want to go over to Northwestern or DePaul or UIC and engage in campus ministry. I think the possibilities are limitless in many ways. You may be one of those students who say, well, I really have this gift for music, and I'm interested in theater and the arts. And so wouldn't it be great if we could partner perhaps with a Dussault Museum or with the symphony or with some other arts institution here in Chicago, or in the city or area where you are. If you're in Ohio, or if you're in Florida or Nebraska or Wisconsin, how can we expand the offerings, if you will, as it relates to field placement? And so perhaps thinking out of the box, not just sort of your typical congregational or social service agency placement, but also thinking about, how can we engage the arts and begin to find ways in which they are sort of theological tenets or theological frameworks, even as we think about music and drama and the arts. And so, I want you to help me to find resources, and I want to help to match you with resources and with settings that in many ways align with what you believe God is calling you to do. Just to reiterate, what you do with field placement, it is hands-on. It is, yes, this is what I've learned in class, and this is whether what I've learned in class works really out here in the real world. We hope it does. But people are organic, situations change, and sometimes what we're learning may pose some cognitive dissonance for what it is that we are experiencing, and that's okay. Sometimes what we're learning surely aligns with, this feeding program, or what I'm learning in hospice care, or what I'm doing with this community garden, or the work that I'm doing with teens in a certain area, and that's just as great. But the issue is, how do we understand that this is where, yes, the word that we're learning in the classroom is really sort of, made flesh. That's what John says. In the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God, and the Word became what? It became flesh and dwelt among us. And so how can we live and move and dwell among God's people? How can what we're learning in our classrooms help us to really learn and to dwell and to really to be in community among God's creation? So you may be asking, well, what will I do in field placement? What's going to happen? And a lot of it depends on the placement itself. So much of it is just, it's subjective. Just know you'll be serving and you'll be engaging in some degree of ministry for 10 to 15 hours a week. So that's why it's important to make sure that there's a good fit, because you're going to spend a lot of time at this particular church or agency or parish setting or congregation. So you'll be serving in some degree, and it's our hope that you'll be doing some things that you have not done in the past, that this won't be just a way of repeating some things that you already know, but it will be an opportunity for you to sort of stretch and to grow and to stretch yourself and to push yourself to do something different, to get out of our comfort zones, to move ourselves to that place of discomfort, because we want to, yes, train ourselves and to help allow people or give people the opportunity to train us and to educate us. Yeah, it's theological field education. So what are you learning about yourself? What are you learning about your own sense of calling and vocation? And yes, what are you learning about other people and other forms of service? You may have grown up in the church and you kind of have that under your belt, but how about learning, from another kind of religious institution? Or how about learning from a institution that focuses on social justice and advocacy? You may decide, well, I've kind of grown up in this particular way. How about pushing ourselves to do something that we never imagined that we could do, so that we learn about ourselves, we learn about God's people, we learn about creation. It's about professional development. That's what this seminary experience is about. This is a professional degree. And so how can you develop who you are as far as your career and your vocation and calling? You will spend, yes, much time in field placement on reflection and self-evaluation as you begin to process your hands-on experiences, as you begin to think about what it is that you've witnessed, what you've seen, as you begin to think about those things that perhaps didn't go so well, and how can we tweak those things, or perhaps maybe not do those again. But you'll spend a lot of time engaging in action and reflection and action. You'll meet with your supervisor at least an hour a week, as she or he will also help you to process what you're experiencing at this community-based organization or this parish or congregation. So this is just a general sort of outline of what you'll be doing during field placement. It's important that we have a degree of accountability, and so that, yes, you are accountable to the placement itself, you're accountable to your supervisors, but you're also saying how these places are also accountable to you, because these are organizations who have agreed to partner with CTS and sort of to prepare you and to help you to go to the next phase in your vocation and in your own sense of professional development. The other aspect of field placement not only has to do with the supervisory experience, self-reflection that you will do with your supervisor, self-reflection that you'll do on your own, but there's also some things that we require here at Chicago Theological Seminary. You will spend much time with this learning covenant. It's divided into 3 parts. First part of the learning covenant is just an agreement between you and your learning side and your supervisor, saying that yes, they are going to facilitate this process with you, that they are agreeing for the next 400 hours or so from September to May to sort of work with you and to guide you in many ways through this process. The second part of the learning covenant aligns with primarily our goals here as far as the MDiv program and the MARL program here at CTS. And so we want to make sure that what you're doing is in line with our learning outcomes. And so you'll spend some time working on that second part and aligning your particular goals with the learning outcomes of the respective degrees, whether it's the MDiv degree or whether it's the MARL degree. The third part of the learning covenant just really gives detail. It's sort of the administrative piece. and it outlines what you'll be expected to do for the 10 to 15 hours per week that you'll be serving at these particular field placement sites. And it just outlines how what you will be doing will be in alignment with the particular learning outcomes. And so throughout the year, you'll see that part 1 of the covenant will be due at a certain time. Then parts 2 and 3 are usually due 6 to 8 weeks after the fall semester has begun. But there are some students who decide that they want to begin field placement in the summer, and so then the due dates for these change depending on when a particular student commences his or her field placement experience. But regardless of when you begin the experience, everyone has to submit the learning covenant. There's also a midterm evaluation after you've completed roughly about 200 hours at your field placement site. You will have to submit a midterm evaluation, and that's just a way of the supervisor checking in with you, you checking in with CTS, and it's sort of, again, it's the accountability piece to let us know if, how things are going, if things are going well, how you are progressing towards your goals, how things are indeed in line with, our CTS learning outcomes. It may even, give us, kind of flag if there are some issues or some concerns, some personnel concerns as it relates to the field placement side. So the midterm evaluation is just a midpoint check-in, if you will, that students have to submit to the field education office here at CTS. And it's just a matter of letting us know how things are going midpoint in the field placement process. The end of your time there, after your 400 hours are completed, you'll submit a final evaluation. The form and format are very similar to the midterm evaluation, but it's just a larger assessment of the experience itself. And so your supervisor gives us details as to what you've done. It's his or her analysis of the experience. And it's also your opportunity to share your learnings and how you have met or perhaps had some challenges meeting any particular goals that you set during the course of the year. Again, as you're thinking about learning covenant and this midterm evaluation and final evaluation, simultaneously or concurrently, you'll be participating in the LM400 course. So you'll have various assignments there, various readings there, and just various ways in which you will continually and simultaneously engage theory and praxis. And so yes, you're doing the field work, but at the same time, you're still checking back in with us as far as letting us know, well then, here's some theory related to what you're doing and how do they sort of both go hand in hand. You'll also have field placement journals. Again, reflection. It's very critical. If we're talking about theological field education, how are we learning to process who God is? How are we understanding our own sense of calling? How are we understanding our own growth, our challenges, our own growing edges? And so you'll spend time on personal reflection and in journaling as well. You'll spend time with your peers and colleagues because you'll be engaged with a group of persons who will also be completing their field placement experiences. And so it'll be an opportunity for you to share and to gain ideas and to learn and to really be a support group for each other in some sense. These are just a few, and I say just a few, of the parish or community and community field placement sites. I have a whole book of opportunities here in the Theological Field Education office. And so please don't hesitate to stop by. If you go to the CTS website, you'll see a working list of some of the churches and some of the community-based agencies that we have worked with in the past. But again, the opportunities are as broad and as varying as you could only imagine. And so where do you begin? Begin where do you think God is calling you? What are your gifts, your graces? What are your talents, if you will? This just gives you just a glimpse but there are so many more opportunities. And so I spend a lot of time trying to bring new partners on board, trying to collaborate with new agencies, but I also want you to help me to identify potential and prospective field placement sites and opportunities. Where do we begin? Yeah, begin with you. Begin with who God is calling you to be. Begin with what you think God is calling you to do. Come to me. And again, I have some resources here. There's some resources on our website. Network. Talk to former students. Talk to people that you know in the community. Refer to other resources here at Chicago Theological Seminary. Don't be limited just by what you may see or what you may have heard. Let's again try to expand the offerings. Let's see if we can sort of get beyond the boundaries and try to expand those who will partner with us and those who will share with us, those who will commit to preparing, yes, a generation of students, a generation of leaders for their next level, for their next opportunity, who are committed or who will commit to help us to prepare a student for what God is going to do next. And who knows what that is. So where do you begin? You begin with you and then just kind of branch off from there. Begin with what do you believe God is calling you to do and how you believe that God is calling you to serve. In case there's something here that I've just kind of jumbled and just garbled, and there's something else that you don't understand, or you just want to stop by and meet me, please feel free to do that. I'm here on the first floor. Give me a call or email me. Let me know what's on your mind, and if you come across some new opportunities or you have some questions as you're thinking about field placement, or you just want to know some more detail about the nuts and bolts, or you have some questions about what's required and things of that nature, please don't hesitate to stop in or to call me or to send me an email. I'll do my best to respond and to give you a thorough answer. And trust me, if I don't know, I know how to punt and forward you to someone else. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your time. I appreciate your attentiveness during the first installment where we talked about what is theological field education. I'm glad you gave me the opportunity to talk more specifically about field placement sites. And I hope that you will stay tuned and go to the third installment as we talk specifically about clinical pastoral education and the role that someone named Anton Boyson has really had in establishing CPE. But we'll get to that later. Thank you so much. Take care and have a great day.